Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the program. I'm Christiana Manpour. Pushback on ISIS. After admitting that Kobani could well fall to the terror group, the United States is now stepping up its assistance to Kurdish fighters in that Syrian city, airdropping weapons, ammunition and medical supplies. And after weeks sitting on the sidelines, now Turkey says it will allow the passage of Iraqi Kurdish fighters into the border city to help. Kobani's Kurds have been begging for help ever since ISIS marched on the city last month. But failing to take Kobani yet is a psychological blow to the group that advances on fear and oil money and donations from wealthy Gulf patrons. Most are said to be in Kuwait and Qatar, but also in Saudi Arabia, which has a long and troubled history funding extremist Islam. But the kingdom will be quick to tell you that is not official policy, especially now that Saudi Arabia has joined the U.S. coalition against ISIS. So is Saudi Arabia trying to destroy a monster that it helped create? My next guest tells me better late than never. Saudi prince and billionaire businessman Al-Walid bin Talal joined me earlier from Paris with that and his assessment on the global economy, because when Al-Walid talks, markets listen. Prince Al-Walid, welcome to the program.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with you, Christian.
Let me first and foremost ask you about the fight to destroy ISIS. Do you agree with that fight, and do you think what the United States and the alliance are doing is working?
What is happening right now is very important, and yes, we have to continue not only in containing and degrading ISIS, we have to talk about demolishing and eradicating them completely.
Do you think it'll work?
Well, for now, I think the first action of hitting through airstrikes, this is the first step, I think, in a long and more concerted effort that has to continue for possibly many years, as Mr. Obama said. I think eventually that ground forces have to be committed and may not necessarily be U.S. forces. There are a lot of surrogate forces that could be used, either the Iraqi forces after you upgrade them, and some of the Syrian elements, the Free Army elements, could be used also, and maybe one day Turkey also could join.
And what about Saudi Arabian ground forces?
Well, I cannot talk on behalf of Saudi Arabia, but clearly the fact that Saudi Arabia right now is involved through its Air Force and is joining the US-led coalition, at a certain time in history, there may be a possibility for that.
Let me ask you about ISIS itself. You are on record as calling it a disease, a terrorist disease. And yet, as you very well know yourself, Prince Al-Walid, Saudi Arabia has been blamed over many, many, many years for funding and allowing extremism to flourish. Doesn't Saudi Arabia also bear so much of the brunt of the blame for the rise of ISIS and such groups?
It doesn't help right now to talk about what caused the ISIS rises. That's another question for another interview, maybe. But for now, ISIS is a fact on the ground, and we have to face it head on. And I'm glad that Mr. Obama took the leadership and assembled this world-class, top-notch countries to try to stop that disease from spreading even further in our region.
Yeah, but Prince Al-Walid, my question is directed at you regarding Saudi Arabia's responsibility in this regard.
When the Syrian civil war began, Saudi Arabia and many other Gulf countries and many other countries in the world also supported all those groups that were trying to topple the regime over there. And unfortunately, the result of that was the rise of ISIS.
What about funds by wealthy individuals in Saudi Arabia? Are they allowed to? Do they get punished now for sending funds to any kind of extremist group?
No doubt that, and with all honesty, I tell you that, yes, we had a weakness over there, whereby unfortunately, some extremists in Saudi Arabia, extremist elements in Saudi Arabia did fund certain extremist elements in Syria, but Saudi Arabia has taken very strict rules to stop that from happening. And yes, right now, all this has been stopped completely.
Are you confident that it will stop completely? And what about the lectures and the sermons in the mosques? Because they also are part of this sort of incitement.
Saudi Arabia has enacted many laws actually incriminating any person going outside Saudi Arabia and joining those extremist forces. So now it's a law in Saudi Arabia. Also in the mosques.
Do you wish that Saudi Arabia had taken this move much earlier? As
you say, better late than never. Thanks God it happened right now. And Saudi Arabia right now has joined the international forces.
We're talking about Syria. ISIS obviously has a huge amount of money and funds from oil as well. How do you assess their wealth and their power, and particularly now with the oil prices sinking?
It is very difficult to assess, really, the ISIS the amount of money ISIS has, because I don't believe that any intelligence system in the world has infiltrated their infrastructure. But clearly they are well-fed. Clearly they have some funds. So clearly this is a rich organization. And but I believe very strongly that we are seeing early indication of some success on the ground, whereby the U.S. continuous bombardment of the United States and its allies has really began halting and inflicting some damage on ISIS.
The price of oil is falling at the moment, and you have taken on a very public row with your own Saudi oil minister. Why is it that you have done that? What is your aim here?
My aim is that same oil minister of Saudi Arabia, just a few months ago, said that at $100, consumers and producers are happy. And now when it went down to $80, he's not talking. So the fact that he was happy when the price was at $100, the fact that now it sank to $80 and may sink even further, that's an omen, that's a bad omen for Saudi budget. You have to remember that Saudi Arabia's budget is 90% dependent on oil. So any meltdown, any collapse in the price of oil will immediately and automatically impact our budget. My objective is really to have Saudi Arabia less dependent on that commodity, no matter how valuable it is for the international community.
The recent IMF report suggests that the global growth is really hitting a major stumbling block. What do you think about growth coming up?
It's very clearly that right now you see the United States stabilizing around 2 to 3%, which is really acceptable growth, at least for the short term. But we are seeing pockets of danger, whereby the growth in China is beginning to plateau and go down. Also in Japan, the same thing is applicable. And most importantly now in Europe, where in continental Europe specifically, whereby Germany was the anchor country in the growth of this European community. And right now we are seeing that the growth there is being reduced from around 2% to 1.3%. So that's very alarming, because the whole European continent was dependent on the growth of Germany.
To get back to terrorism, if you had a message to your own people, to the people of Saudi Arabia, to the people in the region, to those who attempted to go fight, but more importantly, to give money that fund these militant extremist groups, what would you say to Saudis who attempted to do that, and to your own authorities and to your own mullahs?
There's a Quranic verse that says, God will not change you until what you change within yourself. And I think this Islamic saying is very important. It summarizes the whole thing. I think we have to look inwards, and we have to be sure that to begin changing the way of thinking, to change the way of our acts, and to change some of our the way of approaching such matters. These, I mean, what you have seen in front of our eyes is horrendous acts of just massacring and killing men and enslaving ladies and imprisoning young people. That's a big lesson for us, is that these people are just criminals. These have nothing to do with Islam. We have a problem. We don't have a problem with Islam, but we have a problem with Islamism, which is political Islam, and we need to neutralize that.
Prince Al-Wolid, thank you very much for joining me from Paris.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Christiana. Thank you.